Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's conversation about Broadcom and VMware, where we're going to try to answer all of your questions, every one of them, about Broadcom and VMware and the changes that are happening and how it affects service providers and you as a client. With me today, I have our CEO, Brian Smith. I have our COO, John Rosenson, and we're going to kind of walk through where we see the program going and what changes we've seen and how we see Expedient being able to fit into the new space. So, John, kind of walk me through the new Expedient partnership that we have with Broadcom, because there was a bunch of changes that happened, and where do we fit into that program now?
Yeah, AJ, it's a very new program. We just became a pinnacle partner in Broadcom's Advantage program. So as you know, VMware's program was ended at the end of last year, and we became part of this new program that gives us new access that we didn't have under the prior program. Two key important elements of the new program are that we get the opportunity to be one of only 12 partners in the United States that has access to the highest levels of discounts that Broadcom offers. That allows us to extend the best price possible to our clients within our solutions. And it gives us access to the accounts that the VMware account managers are using and managing to provide our solutions to clients who weren't necessarily aware of service provider offerings in the past, which enable us to offer them managed services on top of the VCF or VMware Cloud Foundation software.
And that sort of partnership is very limited to obviously just the 12 you said, but I think overall that simplification of the number of partners, there was thousands before, it's much, much smaller now. Do we see that being something that clients start to turn to because their existing partnerships might be changing, or we fit into better spaces with the VMware sellers?
Absolutely. It's a big differentiator for this short list of pinnacle partners like Expedient. We are well positioned inside the program to provide support to existing VMware clients who are looking for solutions to solve their cost and their operating models. Simplification is a great word. That's the word that Broadcom uses. So they've simplified the product offerings. They've moved from hundreds of SKUs to single-digit numbers of SKUs.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot easier to understand what you're getting. That means you're getting more than you probably were using before. So how do you get value out of that? Well, you use a service provider like Expedient that can provide a solution that leverages all of that technology. And you can do it at a cost structure that's going to be the best available in the market.
And Brian mentioned he just mentioned the simplification of all the SKUs. How do we see that affecting existing VMware customers?
Sure. One of the big differences there is going to be the consumption of the different services that people can use, because previously they had to make lots of different decisions. And there were, like John said, hundreds of SKUs, but thousands of individual components in there that you had to make decisions on what you were going to do and what you're going to leverage. And in this now, there's really the one VCF SKU that we have with the VMware Cloud Foundation, and then all of those components with a few different add-ons are in there. So you get that true cloud-like experience, and you're making one decision for what your hypervisor is, and then you have all those other components that are pre-engineered to work as one system.
And we've seen in the past, VMware has done the growth that they've had through a number of different acquisitions. NSX was Nicira. When they brought in some of the Carbon Black with security. In the Horizon space, they had Desktone that they brought on for desktop as a service. So does this sort of change the way that Broadcom sees VMware growing?
It's really about their original goal was to have one unified experience in that cloud operating model for users. But each IT person really likes to build things. And
right.
So they would take their components, things that they knew, things that they were aware of, and plug them in with other VMware technologies to have their own version of a cloud. And by tying this all together, that's really what VMware's vision was to start with. So by bundling everything together, it gives people one decision where they have access to everything. So now there's not a separate sale that you're doing inside your own business to say, well, I want to move from this networking technology to this other, and here's the implied cost. It's actually all tied together, and it's about how you get the best utilization of all the capabilities.
And John kind of alluded to that around getting the most value out of the platform. And I think that's really where we've seen and heard from clients and customers that there is a cost increase to this. Does it seem like it's just the old number was this and now the new number is this and it's a one-to-one thing, or is there really a value shift that's happening there?
Sure. Well, there's a couple different components that go with the cost change. One of those is if you looked at all the previous services and bundled those together, the new cost is less than all of those individually. And not everybody was using all of those services.
Right.
The other piece was you were buying a perpetual license previously and then paying a service fee for maintenance each year thereafter. And this is changing to a subscription model, which really all software has been pivoting to. But then part of that is in the announcement from Broadcom and VMware is that they're increasing their R&D spend by $1 billion. So they're taking that additional investment to make that one unified experience and tying it all together.
And I think that kind of plays back into the individual businesses. For people who have not really seen the inside of VMware, they had individual business units. This was the networking and security business unit. This was the compute business unit. And they were all kind of not necessarily competing, but they were individualized. And sometimes you could tell that they didn't talk to one another. But now unifying it under this is one overall VCF platform, do we see that $1 billion effectively going to a simplified stack?
That's how they've described it, that they've taken away those different silos, that it's really about charging towards that one experience. And that's also why they really limited the Pinnacle program to such a small set, because they look for providers not just based on the sheer quantity of VMware licensing, but also the consumption of the different technologies. Because their goal is for their clients is to have, if they go to Expedient or they go to another Pinnacle partner, that they would have a similar experience as far as what stack is being consumed, what technology is available, so that their sales teams are comfortable referring clients into that cloud operating model in that manner. So our know-how inside the business is going to be a significant differentiator versus if a company had to build up knowledge on each of these individual components versus we're deploying that at scale.
And I think, John, to the sort of shift that we've seen, this isn't a new thing for us as Expedient. We've been building EEC, or Enterprise Cloud, off of this software-defined stack and helping clients optimize those costs. So how do we see clients coming on board to our platform, and how do we help them optimize in the new sort of model?
Sure. We've been a VMware partner since 2006, and Brian and I have been working together since before then, when we were managing bare metal. The opportunity for our clients is to take advantage of our scale and, as Brian said, our know-how. So we offer two forms of cloud. We offer a multi-tenant experience where clients share the expense and the cost of all of the components that make up that cloud platform, that VCF platform. We also offer private cloud. Now, there are different needs and desires from clients to have a private experience versus a shared experience, and some of those include needs for compliance and needs for performance. But we are able, because of our scale, to build the highest performance shared infrastructure possible. And as we say in our mission statement, we're a curator of enterprise technologies. So rather than an end user client having to have relationships with 10, 15, 20 vendors, they can have one relationship with Expedient, and we put all of those technologies together in a solution that serves the needs that they have based upon their workloads.
And I think that is something that a lot of organizations struggle with, of just vendor management. And I think this is also sort of the interesting part of, in a lot of, especially larger organizations, there's individual teams that manage things. This is the networking team, this is the storage team, this is the compute team. That simplifying this stack down, do you see organizations potentially simplifying and going to more of a simplified organizational stack to be able to take advantage of all of these together?
I guess, how are you envisioning that?
So instead of having a individual compute and storage and networking team, having a cloud team.
That's really been the goal, is people are trying to get to that cloud operating model so that they're not having all the silos of specialization, and they have people that are more focused, honestly, on their business and less on some of the technology. So it's, what are the things inside the technology stack that make an impact to your business, and the service provider takes care of all the things that are keeping the lights on and making sure that you have 100% availability.
And when they've shifted this bundle now to VCF, I'm sure that there are clients who are saying, I don't need all of that. Is there another option? Is there other options other than just one big bundle?
So for service providers, VCF is really the only bundle. For SMB business, for small and medium business, VMware does sell a VVF license that's less expensive, but they are making some choices in there. So some of the big things that they are choosing not to leverage, automation is one of the biggest. So if you did automation with VRA, that's not available. Or if you're doing software-defined networking and microsegmentation inside NSX, that's not available. And also support hours are become limited. So you don't have the same 24/7 support that you would have and that you've used previously. So it is really designed for the SMB business versus the VCF is for that mid-sized business to enterprise.
And I think that's, those decision points are, I think it kind of funnels it down to, okay, do I need these certain components, or do I need this certain level of support? When a client wants to come into Expedient, they're seeing this big shift from their perpetual license to their subscription license. Does this open up any opportunities for them, John, to come over to us?
Absolutely. So as a Pinnacle partner, we have the ability to offer them flexible licensing to make that transition. And that opportunity allows them to move to a managed services model and get a relationship with us as a service provider that can solve a lot of their business challenges and get them the outcome they're looking for.
But does that allow them to bring their own license too?
In fact, it does. If they have an ELA, we will be able to work with them to use that until its end and allow them to transition in a manner that's more predictable for them from not only a cost perspective, but their operating model from a financial recognition perspective.
Also, from a timing perspective, if they have an ELA that's ending and they weren't able to do their full migration in that time, we could use our licensing back on their hardware as a Pinnacle partner to help with that transition. Because one of the things in that Pinnacle program is we have a committed license, just like an end user would, but we also have the ability to do a consumption-based license, so that we could take additional licensing, put it on their hardware in a month-to-month fashion while they finish the transition. But that same type of burstable license enables us to do services like disaster recovery as a service, where it becomes consumption-based licensing, just like we've always done on DR.
Right.
Versus if they're doing DR internally, that's an expense that they would have 100% at all times.
And I think that's a huge cost shift for a lot of organizations, because if you're running your own disaster recovery, you've got that full license stack running all the time on a set of hardware that you hopefully never have to use. And now with a service provider like Expedient, we're able to say, okay, well, we have the ability for you to replicate over and fail over when you need to, but you don't get hit with the huge charge every single month. So I think that could be a huge cost savings for them, right?
Yeah, it can be a major cost mitigation factor right now, because if they have their own licensing and they could continue licensing their production if they wanted to keep that in-house and do DR, build confidence in a service provider, and then over time they could leverage and move production as well.
So do we see that as being a large part of our guidance for clients who want to transition into a service provider, John?
Absolutely. For DRAS especially, I think, given the cost changes that are happening with the bundles, we believe that the best option for clients for DR long-term, from a cost perspective, first and foremost with this change, but also from an operating model long-term with the consistency that VMware is looking to Pinnacle partners to provide the upgrades and patches and lifecycle management of the VCF stack.
Yeah, and I think that's where we really fit in, is beyond just that, here's the licensing shift and here's what's happened, is, okay, now how do you go solve bigger problems?
Exactly.
Which has, I think, been a lot of what we've focused on and tried to help clients with over the last 20 odd years. How do we see that going forward with, this new model where clients want to, engage a better level of support with Expedient and being able to come on to us as a service provider?
So I'll answer that as I'm understanding you. Effectively, when clients use Expedient, they can focus on their applications and ensuring the best experience for their clients based on the features in their applications and the software that they're operating on the platform. Because we're freeing them up by doing all of the lifecycle management, like I mentioned before, but also providing them the latest technology in a manner or a cadence that's going to allow them to to manage their applications and the workloads in the best possible manner so that they're efficiently using the resources, they're getting the most value out of it, and frankly, the outcomes that their clients demand from them.
And does that help them figure out their future investments from there?
Yeah, I think there's a front end also, in addition to what John said, that Expedient's always had a firm belief that if we give people easy access to high quality data, it gives them a better overall decision. So we have tooling that we can provide to clients on the front end to evaluate their current environment, identify risk points, identify areas where they may have more resource provision than they need, where pinch points are from a performance perspective, so that we can get them right size, which during an onboarding process can have a significant impact to the investment they're making, in addition to the different DR components. And then we look at that same type of information from an ongoing day two management.
That's a really, really great point that they get with the know-how that our teams have. They really get a optimized experience for their entire stack.
And I think that plays into the amount of licensing that they're not paying for and eliminating that overhead. And I think that's something that a lot of clients who are running their own workloads on premises today have an amount of amount of resources that they are paying for that are just there for potential growth or failover. How do we as Expedient help eliminate that overhead?
Sure. There's a couple different pieces and that's part of the reason Broadcom's making the switch to that subscription model in a service provider, that we can grow and scale as the need of our client changes, so that we can add resources and grow into that. So in aggregate, we have a lot less overhead or unused capacity than if you look at 1,000 companies that are running inside the platform. If they were each running individually, they have all those redundant hosts that are sitting there. They have to make decisions of how much capacity am I going to need in 3 to 5 years, and they buy hardware all at once for that, and they're paying for that unused capacity along the way. Where a core part of our business is that capacity management and making sure that we're adding things in, licensing things appropriately, so that we don't have extra waste in the system that you would have if you're running all those individual environments.
So we're effectively combining optimizing the overhead and eliminating that as much as possible on the front end for production, and then helping clients on the back end with DR when they need to fail over with not having to pay for that overall. So I think that could be massive on both sides to save, even when we see clients coming in with exceedingly large workloads, or even if they were pretty efficient to start with.
Yeah, you take that and then marry it with that we, not just from VMware, but from other companies, have the ability to buy licensing in a different manner than an enterprise can, and in many cases in that consumption component.
And I think, how do we see that future changing with cloud services as VMware makes this transition? Do we see VMware maintaining a central role in that? Do we see some shifts happening as part of that because of all of the changes in client sentiment?
Well, I mean, clients have choice. So VMware software adds and offers a lot of value. And if cloud service providers meet the moment that Broadcom has set up, we believe that the shift will be that many more VMware clients will purchase and use VMware technology through service providers, because it will give them the outcomes they're looking for, including operating model and including price.
Yeah, but we're fully aware that there's a lot of emotion that's involved right now, and because anytime there's change, there's initial emotional reaction, and then you have to step back and say, what's the right decision, and then also understanding what's the cascading impact of that decision. And one of the reasons that VMware is a leader is the ecosystem of the other technologies that connect into it. And we also believe that you need to have choice. So we offer alternate hypervisors as well, and prioritize those based on also the total ecosystem that's available of technologies that run. So we have both VMware and Nutanix-based environments that we offer to clients. But when you think about how does it change the sentiment over time, I don't know if you're thinking that it's a new, everything's going to be cloud first 2.0. And I think that we've already seen what that looks like. So for 15 years, there was the trend that everything's going to end up in a hyperscale. And roughly 15 to 25%, depending on the company, ended up in hyperscale. And if you put the right applications there, it can be the absolute best location.
Right.
But what the landing point has been, and really everything from 2022 forward, has been put the right workload in the right place, and hybrid is the permanent. And VMware has over 90% market share for the hypervisor that's non-hyperscale. So it's unlikely that if you that everyone's going to just instantly change that to a different technology because it has huge cascading impact.
Do we see ourselves fitting into helping that, leveraging potentially alternate hypervisors, or bringing, kind of both of them together as a solution overall for clients to help them optimize? Like, these are the workloads that I really think need to stay on VMware, but this is my, maybe test dev workloads, or this is my, tier 2 applications, and I don't feel like I need that VMware stack to support that. Do we see that as part of an optimization?
I don't know if I see it in kind of the way that you've described it. I think that we absolutely have a role and a responsibility to help people make the decision on what workload should be in which place. And we already do that today in our assessment process, that what things fit well in Expedient, what things fit well in a hyperscale. And now there's that additional piece of which hypervisor things should run on. And we've even written some calculators to help people understand that they could predict what their cost likely would be from the licensing, and to give some additional clarity on that, and then show what that looks like in a service provider on a VMware, service provider on Nutanix. So there's a lot of different decision points that go into that.
But I think that guidance is really where, John, you've mentioned this a number of times, the know-how of, okay, here's what we see. This is what we do. And I think this fits into our overall core competency. We're providing a service, whether that's the actual managed service that we run month to month, but that assessment and optimization service up front. Do we see the impact to clients being something that becomes that emotional decision, or that they decide to make a harder shift than they should, or that they really recognize? Do we see that kind of, almost back to Brian's point of like cloud first, we're going all the way in on AWS. Whoops, that was a bad idea. We need to make changes there. Do we see that shift happening?
I'm sure there will be a continuum of decision making that we can model after we go through this process. And yes, there will probably be some organizations that make or try to make wholesale changes. But I think what we'll find, as we did with the cloud first strategy, is that it's hard. It's costly, it's time consuming, and sometimes when you make the move, you don't actually get a benefit from it.
Right.
You're just moving a problem, for example. So I think the answer is probably it will be different by organization, but with our guidance and our knowledge and know-how, as you said, we'll help customers through that process, to show them data, to give them themes that we're seeing across all of the organizations that we're working with, and allow them to make the best decision for their workloads.
Yeah, I think what I expect is likely going to happen is people start to make the first decision. And the first decision is, okay, I'm thinking about using a different hypervisor. Then they realize the next decision, does my backup platform work with that? Does my networking work with that? Do my people understand that technology? And back to a lot of what people are trying to drive towards is simplification, so they can focus their people on the things that really affect their business. And that's where a service provider really comes into play, because they can make one decision of using a service provider where we take over the decisions for curating the technology stacks and delivering the availability, so they can really just focus on their application.
And I think that's something that a lot of organizations don't realize about the service provider space, is that when we talk about alternate hypervisors, it's not just here's where you run your workloads. It's we have our cloud data protection, we have our disaster recovery as a service, we have our monitoring tools, and they work across those hypervisors. So it's not necessarily something that you have to make decisions on in two different sets of tooling. We can bring all of it together to actually make that make sense. Do we see clients making the bigger decisions to jump to something like a hyperscaler off of that? Like they want to move to,
Sure.
Okay, this is too much. I want to go to one single platform. Hey, here's Azure, or here's AWS. They do all the stuff that we're kind of talking about. Do we see that shift happening?
That's a pretty radical jump, to be honest, because you think of the conversation of a journey that people talk about, the cloud journey.
Right.
And I think of that as, you're doing a physical travel journey, and you use different modes of transportation. You use a plane and a train and a boat. So those different modes of transportation have a function. And similar to different modes of cloud, of a hyperscale cloud versus an enterprise cloud like an Expedient or one of the other Pinnacle partners, those have different purposes. And people have had 15 years really to decide which application fits best in which cloud. And so I don't know that I see that this doesn't really change where those land and what works better. If you're building something from scratch, that hyperscale, and you're using their specific tooling and you're fine being locked into that specific technology, you can get a lot of benefit. But if you're running those existing applications, those things that power your enterprise, you're not going to get a lot of value of just lifting and shifting that into a hyperscale, and likely it's going to be more expensive than the cost delta that you were thinking from your own VMware licensing, and for sure it's significantly more expensive than running on like an Expedient platform.
So we've heard a lot of emotion. Anytime we talk about Broadcom or VMware, you go to any webinar, just like this one, you'll hear a lot of people in the comments, in the chat, in the Q&A asking about, my costs are going up by 3x or 5x. How is this affecting Expedient, and what are our clients seeing?
I think the emotion is reasonable. Anytime there's change, especially related to pricing, it drives a lot of emotion. We had the same response internally. There were a lot of conversations of what's the impact going to be, how are we going to address this, because we want to minimize the impact to clients. And as we went through and looked at what are the adjustments we could make in design, what are the adjustments that we can make in our process to make sure that we optimize everything for the client, we ended up having a couple different types of increases based on what type of service. So overall, the average clients had less than a 5% increase.
Wow.
So we were really happy with that. And for people that were on dedicated platforms, there's additional overhead because there's more redundant servers dedicated to just them than what somebody in our enterprise cloud platform has. So those clients were still in the 17% change, still significantly better than the ranges that you were talking about. And what we were really pleased with on our disaster recovery clients, no impact.
I think the final kind of thing to go through is what should our audience do?
Sure.
I think a lot of people came to this trying to get answers to the questions, but it really comes back to what do I do?
Yeah, I'd say the top three would be: one, know when your ELA is coming up with VMware. So
if you even have an ELA.
Correct, if you have that. Two would be leverage some of the calculators and just the discovery tooling that a service provider has that can give you better visibility, that can help forecast potential costs, identify risk points for you. And three, if you're running disaster recovery internally, it should be an absolute first thing you look to move into a service provider, because you can really avoid the cost of licensing from that platform.
And John, do you see, obviously we are seeing changes as well, our clients, how do we see our clients moving forward, and what should they do?
Well, I'd add number 4 to that list that applies to everyone, which is start a conversation. And we're already having those conversations with our clients relative to the changes that have been announced and that are occurring. And we have clients that are coming to Expedient in the process now. We have clients who are evaluating all of their workloads. I think all 4 apply to our clients as well. And having that conversation early will prepare them for the milestones that are ahead for them in their journey.
Got it. And with that, we're going to go now to your live questions that you've been putting in. Thank you so much. And we'll turn it over to the Q&A section.